I'll never forget the moment I picked up my phone and cancelled my dad's entire Europe tour. It felt like the ground beneath me cracked open, and I was standing on the edge, waiting to fall. My fingers trembled as I hit send, and when the message was delivered, a wave of relief and regret washed over me at the same time. I hadn't meant for it to end this way. But he had pushed me to the limit, and now there was no turning back. It all started a few weeks ago when my dad excitedly announced that he had been planning this huge European getaway. He was going to see the world, make memories, and fulfill his lifelong dream of visiting every country in Europe. The only problem? I didn't even feel like he cared about the people he was supposed to share those memories with me, his daughter, the one who had always been there for him. I had tried to be happy for him, but every time I looked at him, all I could feel was the ache in my chest, like he was slipping further away from me. The more he talked about his trip, the less I felt like a part of his life. It was all about him, his dream, his adventure, and everyone else around him telling him to go for it. They were all in on it. His friends, his business partners, even my mom, everyone but me. They never even asked how I felt, if I was okay with it, or what it meant for me. "Why don't you just come with me?" he suggested one evening, as if it was that simple. As if a quick vacation could make up for years of emotional neglect. I stared at him in disbelief. "Dad, we both know I can't just drop everything and join you. Not like that. You've been planning this for months." But he didn't understand. He didn't get it. And that's when it all came to a head. A few days ago, the argument happened. I had finally reached my breaking point after he casually mentioned that he had booked the flight tickets, but didn't even bother to ask if I wanted to be a part of the plans. "I'm not asking for your permission," he'd snapped. "I've been dreaming of this for years, and you need to understand that." His words stung like knives. The father I once knew, the one who made me feel important, the one who would sit with me after school and listen to my problems, was gone. In his place stood a man who barely noticed I existed unless it was convenient for him. "I understand perfectly," I had said, my voice trembling with the weight of everything I had been holding inside. "You've always had your dreams, Dad. But where do I fit in?" I could see his face tighten, his jaw clenching. He didn't want to hear it. But I couldn't stop. "I'm not just going to cheer you on from the sidelines anymore. You've pushed me aside for too long, and I can't keep pretending like everything's fine." That's when I said it. The words I had been holding back for so long. "I'm cancelling your trip. It's done." His eyes widened in disbelief. "What?" The silence that followed was deafening. I stood there, my heart pounding in my chest. For a moment, I thought I might take it all back, but I didn't. I was done. "I'm not going to be a part of this anymore. I'm not going to support you if this is how you treat me," I said, voice steady, even though every part of me wanted to collapse. And just like that, I hit send on the message to his travel agent. I had cancelled his European tour without a second thought. The look on his face was heartbreaking, but at that moment, I didn't care. He needed to see what it felt like to lose something important to him, something he thought he could always count on. Now, standing there, I wasn't sure what would come next. Would he fight for me? Would he regret it? Or was this the end of everything we had ever shared? I couldn't say for sure, but one thing was clear, there was no going back. As my dad stood there, speechless, his face frozen in shock, I realized that the gravity of what I'd just done was beginning to settle in. I had shattered everything. But would he try to fix it, or had I just lost him for good? I didn't hear from my dad for a few days after I cancelled the trip. At first, I thought maybe he just needed time to cool off, but as the silence stretched on, I realized he wasn't cooling off at all. He was fuming. Every time I passed by his office, I could feel his eyes on me, burning with anger. It made my stomach twist into knots, but I wasn't going to back down. I had made my decision, and now I had to live with it. The house felt so empty without the constant chatter about the trip. Before the cancellation, it seemed like every conversation revolved around his plans, his excitement, his packing lists, his endless rambling about what he wanted to do in each country. But now, everything was still. Silent. And that made me wonder if I had just made a huge mistake. It wasn't the cancelling part that bothered me. It was the aftermath, the quiet tension in the air every time I saw him, The way we tiptoed around each other as if we were strangers. I was scared of what would happen next. He'd always been the type to hold a grudge, but this felt different. This felt like a breaking point. A few days later, my mom sat me down for a talk. She had a soft way of easing into difficult conversations, so when she asked me to just hear him out, I knew something was up. "Your dad's been through a lot, Maya," she said, her voice gentle. "You need to understand that this trip, it means everything to him. It's the only thing that's been keeping him going." I felt a surge of frustration. Everything? Really? I had spent my whole life watching my dad focus on his career, his friends, and his own dreams, and I had always been there waiting. Waiting for the moments when he might notice me, when he might see that I needed something too. But now, suddenly, his trip was more important than his relationship with me. That was the moment I realized, I was tired of waiting. "I know," I said through clenched teeth. "I know how important it is to him, Mom. But I can't keep pretending I'm okay with it. I feel invisible to him." My mom sighed, her eyes filled with sympathy. "I know, honey. But you can't erase years of hard work with a single decision. You know how much he's been looking forward to this. Maybe you can just try to understand." Her words stung more than I expected. I wasn't some kid anymore. I wasn't going to pretend that I hadn't been feeling neglected for years. I needed her to see that. Needed her to realize how much I'd been sacrificing for everyone else's happiness while my own kept getting pushed aside. As I left the room, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from Dad. My heart skipped a beat as I read it. "Can we talk?" I stared at the screen for what felt like forever. I knew what was coming next. He was angry. He was hurt. But would he try to guilt me into helping him? Would he use every trick in the book to make me feel like I had ruined everything? I didn't know, but I had to face him. I agreed to meet him in the living room. When I walked in, he was standing by the window, his back turned to me. His posture was rigid, as if he were holding himself together with sheer force of will. The silence between us felt suffocating. "I didn't think you'd go this far," he said, his voice low and tight. When he turned around, his eyes were darker than I had ever seen them. "You really cancelled everything, didn't you?" I nodded, crossing my arms over my chest. "I wasn't going to apologize. Not this time. You didn't leave me any choice." He let out a bitter laugh. "I thought I was giving you a chance to be happy for me, Maya. But you made it clear that I don't matter to you anymore." Those words hit harder than I expected. I didn't know how to respond. He was angry, but there was something else there too, something almost vulnerable. Maybe he was starting to realize just how far apart we'd grown. "You can't just cancel everything because you're mad at me," he continued, his voice cracking slightly. "You're my daughter. I need you." I shook my head. "I need you too, Dad. But I can't be part of your plans if you never even think about what I need. I'm tired of being pushed aside." For a long time, he didn't say anything. We just stood there, staring at each other, and I wondered if we'd ever be able to fix this. Maybe it was too late. Maybe I'd already crossed a line that we couldn't come back from. But then, he surprised me. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean to make you feel like that. But this trip, it was supposed to be my escape. The one thing I could look forward to. I didn't know it was driving you away." His apology was so unexpected that it left me speechless. Was it genuine? Or was he just trying to make me feel guilty? I didn't know what to think anymore. As I stood there, unsure of whether his words were heartfelt or just a way to manipulate me back into his plans, my phone buzzed again. It was a message from his travel agent. "Are you sure you want to cancel the whole trip?" My heart dropped. Was I really ready to destroy everything over this one moment? Or was this a turning point for us? The message from the travel agent sat on my phone screen like a weight I couldn't lift. "Are you sure you want to cancel the whole trip?" I stared at the words for what felt like hours. The urge to backtrack was strong. After all, this wasn't just some small decision, it was huge. My dad's entire dream was on the line. And deep down, I knew that pulling the rug out from under him like this meant losing something far more important than just a vacation. It meant losing him. I couldn't help but glance at him, standing there in the living room, his eyes pleading, his expression so vulnerable that it almost made me question my resolve. But no. I had to remind myself why I had done it in the first place. This wasn't about the trip. It was about the years I'd spent feeling overlooked, like I was just an accessory to his life. The silence between us stretched even longer, until finally, I broke it. You can't just expect me to go back to being okay with everything, Dad. You never listened to me before. You were so wrapped up in your own world, and I've spent all these years waiting for you to notice me. And you never did. He looked taken aback by my outburst, but this time, I wasn't going to hold back. Not anymore. You think I don't matter? That I'm just supposed to cheer you on from the sidelines while you chase your dreams? I'm tired of being invisible. I didn't even realize I was crying until I felt the hot tears rolling down my face. I hadn't cried in front of him in years. It used to be that when I cried, he would rush to comfort me, but now it felt like there was nothing he could do to fix it. My heart was broken in a way that no apology could heal. Dad stepped closer, his hand reaching out like he wanted to touch my shoulder, but he hesitated, clearly unsure of how to bridge the gap that had widened between us. Please, Maya, he said, his voice softening. I'm sorry. I've been selfish. I should have thought about you more. I didn't mean to hurt you. I thought this trip was going to fix everything. Fix everything? I scoffed. How could it fix anything if you keep ignoring the one person who actually cares about you? You think some vacation is going to make up for the fact that I've been screaming for your attention for years? You think that by canceling everything, I'll suddenly forget how you've treated me? Dad's face crumpled, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I saw guilt in his eyes. Maybe it was the guilt that finally got to me, or maybe I just couldn't stand the idea of him leaving for Europe with this cloud hanging over us, but I felt my resolve beginning to crack. Still, I couldn't back down completely. I had to make him understand. I'm not trying to destroy your dreams, Dad. I'm just trying to make you see mine. For once, just once, can you see me? The words hung in the air between us, both painful and full of truth. But no matter how much I wanted to make things right, I couldn't just go back to how things were before. Too much had been said. Too much had been left unsaid. After a long moment of silence, Dad pulled his phone out of his pocket and glanced down at it. It was the travel agent again, probably asking for confirmation to cancel the flights. He shook his head and put the phone back in his pocket, his hand trembling slightly. I don't know what to say anymore, he muttered. I never meant to hurt you, Maya. But I don't know if I can just throw this trip away either. I stared at him. The truth was, I didn't want to throw it away either. I knew how much this meant to him. But what did it say about me if I let him leave, knowing that nothing had changed? Was I just going to keep putting myself second? I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm inside me. I couldn't solve everything in one conversation. This was bigger than just the trip. I need some time, Dad, I said, finally, my voice calmer but firm. I can't just pretend like everything's fine. You need to show me that you're willing to change, that you're willing to put in the work. This isn't just about a trip. It's about us. He nodded, a mix of frustration and sadness in his eyes. I'll try. But I can't promise anything. I didn't know if he would follow through. I didn't know if we could ever fix what had been broken between us. But I wasn't going to give up on him. Not yet. As I turned to leave, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't just the travel agent, it was a message from my best friend. Are you sure about this? The question lingered in my mind, heavy with doubt. Maybe I wasn't sure. Maybe this was a mistake. Or maybe, just maybe, this was the only way to make him see me. I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled in my chest. The days following that conversation with my dad were filled with so much tension I could almost feel it in the air, thick and suffocating. We both tiptoed around each other like strangers, each of us waiting for the other to make a move, to say something that could finally crack the silence. I tried to focus on other things, work, friends, even little distractions like reading or watching TV. Anything to keep my mind off the storm brewing between us. But no matter what I did, I kept coming back to that damn message from the travel agent. Are you sure you want to cancel the whole trip? I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure about anything anymore. I kept waiting for Dad to do something. To apologize again, to try harder. But instead, it felt like he was waiting for me to give in. It was maddening. Why was it always me? Why was it always my job to pick up the pieces of the mess he created? Then, it happened. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I was sitting in the kitchen, scrolling through my phone, when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, so when I opened the door, I was surprised to find my dad standing there, looking a little less put together than usual. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair a little messier than normal, and his eyes, they were different. They weren't filled with anger or frustration. They were full of something else, something I couldn't quite place. I need to talk to you, Maya, he said, his voice soft but urgent. Can I come in? I stepped aside, unsure of what to expect. We hadn't really talked much since that day. The conversation felt unfinished, like we had both said what we needed to say but hadn't fully said it. I wasn't sure what was going to come next, but I was about to find out. He walked in, glancing around the room like he was searching for something, then sat down at the kitchen table. He didn't waste any time. I'm sorry, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I've been a selfish jerk, Maya. I've spent so much time chasing my own dreams that I forgot the most important thing, the people who actually love me. I forgot about you. I wasn't sure how to respond. His apology felt different this time, genuine, even if it came too late. My walls, which had been built up so high, began to crumble just a little bit. But I wasn't going to forgive him that easily. I couldn't. I don't know if that's enough, I said quietly, my voice trembling. I've been waiting for you to see me, Dad. To really see me. You've always been too busy with your own life to care about what I need. His face twisted with regret, and I could see the weight of his words hitting him hard. I know, Maya. I know. And I can't take back the years I spent ignoring you. But I want to try. I'm trying. His sincerity hit me in waves, but I still wasn't sure if I could trust him again. The scars of the past were deep, and no matter how much he apologized, I wasn't sure I could ever forget the neglect. The feeling that I had been invisible for so long. You've got a lot of making up to do, I said, my voice low but firm. It's not just about the trip, Dad. It's about everything. About you being there for me, not just when it's convenient for you. I can't just pretend like everything's okay. He nodded, his shoulders slumping in defeat. I understand. I really do. I've been selfish. But I can't cancel the trip. It means too much to me, and I just don't want to lose you. His words were raw, vulnerable, and it hit me like a punch to the gut. For the first time, I saw him really see me not as an accessory to his life, not as a background figure, but as his daughter, someone he had hurt. But as much as I wanted to believe him, I couldn't just let him go on this trip without understanding the damage he'd done. So what happens now? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. You go off to Europe, and then what? Do you think we can just pick up where we left off when you get back? His eyes clouded over with uncertainty, but he didn't try to argue. I don't know, Maya. But I know I need to prove to you that I can change. I can't do this without you. I'm not sure how to make up for what I've done, but I need to try. Please, don't make me lose you, too. The sincerity in his voice was almost overwhelming. My heart ached, torn between the hurt of the past and the hope of something better. But could I really trust him again? Could I give him another chance? As I stood there, staring at him, unsure of what to say next, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a message from the travel agent. It was a text from my best friend, Sophie. You need to make a decision, Maya. Are you going to let him go? The question hung in the air, and suddenly, everything felt heavier than before. Was I going to let him go? Or was I going to give him another chance? I stood there, frozen, staring at the text from Sophie. Are you going to let him go? The question haunted me, gnawing at my insides. Sophie, always so practical, always so sure of herself, wanted me to make a choice. But how could I? How could I just pick one path when both felt like they were leading me to different versions of heartbreak? Dad was still sitting at the kitchen table, watching me with such intensity that it made my skin prickle. I could feel the weight of his gaze on me, waiting for an answer. But how could I give him one when I wasn't sure what I wanted? I had spent so long living in the shadow of his dreams, sacrificing my own desires for the sake of his happiness, that I wasn't sure what my happiness even looked like anymore. I glanced at my phone again. Make a decision. Sophie's words stung. She was right, of course. I needed to decide. But I wasn't ready to make that choice yet. Not when everything was hanging by a thread. I don't know if I can forgive you, Dad, I said quietly, my voice shaking. I want to. I really do. But the truth is, you've hurt me more than you realize. And I can't just forget that because you said sorry. His face hardened for a moment, but only for a second. Then, it softened again. I understand. I'm not asking for you to forget everything, Maya. But can you at least let me show you that I can be the father you deserve? That I can be there for you in ways that I never was before. The sincerity in his eyes pulled at something deep inside me. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that he could change. But how could I trust him again after all the times he had let me down? I'm not sure if you can, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. But I'll try. I'll try to believe that you can be the dad I've always needed. But you have to show me. It's not enough to just say the words, Dad. You have to prove it. He nodded slowly, his expression pained but hopeful. I will, Maya. I swear I will. But as much as I wanted to believe him, a nagging doubt settled in the pit of my stomach. Could I really let him go on this trip, knowing that he might leave again and fall back into the same patterns? Could I let him go and hope that he would come back changed, ready to rebuild our relationship? The days following that conversation were a blur. My mind was constantly torn between two worlds, the one where I kept my distance, staying firm in my decision to cancel his trip and protect myself, and the one where I gave him a chance, where I allowed myself to believe that maybe he could change. In the midst of it all, I couldn't help but feel like I was drowning in uncertainty. I'd spent so long being the good daughter, the one who always did what was expected of her, the one who always put everyone else's needs first. But now, it was my turn to decide. My turn to choose what was best for me. One night, after a long day of overthinking, I found myself standing by the window, staring out into the darkness. My mind raced with thoughts of Dad, of his trip, of everything he had said. I could still hear his voice, soft and pleading, asking for another chance. But then I remembered the coldness I'd felt when he told me I wasn't part of his plans, when I realized that my needs didn't matter to him unless it was convenient. Could I ever forget that feeling? Could I ever trust that he wouldn't leave again, chasing his own dreams at the cost of everything else? The phone buzzed again, pulling me from my thoughts. It was another message from Sophie. You need to figure out what you want, Maya. Don't let him make the decision for you. Sophie's words hit me harder than I expected. She was right. It was time to stop letting everyone else make the choices for me. It was time to stop letting my dad's dreams overshadow my own. I sat down at the kitchen table, my fingers hovering over my phone. The travel agent's number was still saved in my contacts. Are you sure you want to cancel the whole trip? It was as if the question was asking me, are you ready to change everything? I couldn't keep putting off the inevitable. The trip was still on, and my dad was still holding on to it like it was his last chance at redemption. But what about me? What about my chance at redemption? With shaking hands, I dialed the number. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. My heart pounded in my chest. Then, the line clicked, and I heard the agent's voice. Hello, this is Carmen from the travel agency. How can I help you? I took a deep breath. I need to cancel the trip, I said, my voice steady. All of it. But as the words left my mouth, a new fear gripped me. What if this was the moment I lost him forever? The silence after I made the call felt deafening. The words had left my mouth with an almost mechanical calmness, but inside, my heart was racing. I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel anger. I just felt this deep, gnawing emptiness. Had I made the right choice? Was this the moment that sealed my fate? The one where I finally stood up for myself but lost everything in the process? After I hung up, I sat there for a few moments, staring at the phone in my hand, unable to move. The finality of what I had just done hit me all at once. I could already hear Dad's reaction in my head, his disbelief, his anger. He had been so focused on his trip that he never even considered how this would affect me. And now, the trip was gone, just like that. I didn't even have time to process it before the door opened behind me. "Why, Maya?" Dad's voice was low, strained, full of hurt. "Why did you cancel it? Why did you take this away from me?" I turned slowly to face him. He was standing in the doorway, looking like he had just been punched in the stomach. His face was pale, his eyes wide with shock and confusion. For a moment, I couldn't say anything. I just stared at him, wondering how we got to this point. "You said you wanted me to prove something, right?" I said, my voice trembling but strong. "You wanted me to show you I can be there for you. But you never once stopped to think about whether I needed you. Not once. It was always about your dreams, your plans, your escape. And now you're mad at me for doing what's best for me." His face contorted with emotion. "You're right, Maya. I've been selfish. I've been focused on what I thought would make me happy without considering how it affected you. But I thought that if I did this, if I went to Europe and had this trip, I could finally fix things. I thought it would give me the space to think, to come back and be better. But now..." His voice trailed off, and he stepped closer, his hand reaching out almost instinctively. "But now you've taken it all away. And I don't know where to go from here." I didn't move. His outstretched hand hung in the air, like he was asking for something he couldn't get back. And I realized then that he wasn't just asking for the trip to be reinstated. He was asking for forgiveness. He was asking me to fix things, to fix us, but he didn't even know where to begin. I shook my head, swallowing the lump in my throat. "I can't fix you, Dad. I can't fix everything with an apology. You've hurt me. And I've spent too long being angry, trying to get you to see me. Now, I'm done waiting for you to change. You either prove it to me, or you don't. But I can't keep going in circles." He stood there for a long moment, his hand still hovering in the air, as if he was waiting for me to reach out and make everything right. But I couldn't. I had already made my decision. And it was the hardest thing I'd ever done in my life. "I don't want to lose you, Maya," he said softly, almost desperately. "But I don't know how to fix this. I don't know if I can ever make it right." "You can't, not in one moment," I replied, my voice more vulnerable than I expected. "But you can start by showing me that I'm not just an afterthought. You can start by proving to me that I matter." He looked at me, his eyes filled with something I couldn't quite place. Guilt? Regret? Or was it love? I didn't know anymore. But the more I looked at him, the more I realized that no matter how much he apologized, no matter how much he begged, the damage was done. I couldn't just let him off the hook this time. "I'm not going to tell you it's too late, because I'm not sure it is. But I need time, Dad. Time to figure out if I can trust you again." He nodded, slowly, his shoulders sagging. "I'll wait. I'll wait for as long as it takes." The words hung heavy in the air. I didn't know if he meant it. I didn't know if I meant it. But there was something about the moment that made me realize just how much I had given up for this family, for this relationship. And now, I had to give up the idea that everything could go back to the way it was. I had to make peace with the fact that change was hard. But if we both wanted it, we could find a way forward. As Dad turned to leave, I glanced at the door and saw something that made my heart skip a beat, a letter lying on the ground. It was from the travel agency, slipped under the door. I bent down to pick it up, and as I read the words, I felt the world stop spinning. "Due to unforeseen circumstances, we have been forced to cancel all bookings for the Europe tour. Your deposit will be refunded in full." It was over. His dream was gone, just like that. But would this finally be the change we both needed? Or was this the beginning of the end? Chapter 7, The Regret. I stood frozen, the letter in my hands, staring at the words over and over again. "Due to unforeseen circumstances, we have been forced to cancel all bookings for the Europe tour." The reality of it hit me like a punch to the gut. I had done it. I had finally cancelled it, but not in the way I had expected. The deposit was refundable. The trip was officially off. The dream my dad had been clinging to was slipping through his fingers, and in a strange, twisted way, I felt both relief and guilt. Dad was still in the living room, sitting on the couch with his head in his hands. I walked over to him slowly, unsure of what to say or how to feel. The silence was thick, suffocating, and when he looked up at me, his eyes were hollow. "You did it," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I didn't mean for it to go like this, Dad," I said, sitting beside him. "I never wanted to take your dream away from you. But I couldn't let you go, not like this. Not when I was still standing here, waiting for you to see me." He didn't respond right away. Instead, he just sat there, looking at the letter in my hand, like it was a symbol of everything that had gone wrong. "I don't know what to do now," he said, his voice cracking. "This trip, it was supposed to be my escape. My fresh start. I thought I could finally prove that I could do something right. But now I have nothing." I felt a pang of sadness for him, but at the same time, a part of me couldn't let go of the anger I had been holding for so long. "You've always been running away, Dad. Always running away from the hard stuff. From me. From us. I've been waiting for you to stop running and start seeing what's right in front of you." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and for the first time, I saw the man I had been waiting for all these years. The man who wasn't perfect but was trying. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I never meant to hurt you. I just didn't know how to be the father you needed. And now, I feel like I've lost everything. Not just the trip, but you. You're all I've got, Maya. I don't want to lose you too." It was in that moment, as I watched him struggle with his own emotions, that I realized something important. This wasn't just about the trip anymore. This wasn't about his escape. This was about a father realizing he had failed his daughter. And it wasn't an easy thing to admit, but he had to. I sat there beside him, my heart torn in two. I could see the pain in his eyes, and I could feel it in my chest too. But this was bigger than any trip. This was about rebuilding what had been broken between us. "I'm not going to lie," I said, my voice trembling. "You've hurt me, Dad. And I don't know if I can forgive you right now. But I don't want to lose you either. I need you to be different. To show me that I'm not just an afterthought." He nodded slowly, his eyes filled with tears. "I will, Maya. I swear, I will. I'll do whatever it takes. I can't promise I'll be perfect, but I'll try. And I'll keep trying until you can see that I'm here for you." I didn't know if he could change. I didn't know if we could go back to how things were. But as I sat there with him, I realized that maybe this was the beginning. Maybe it wasn't about erasing the past but learning to live with it, learning to move forward, even when the road ahead seemed impossible. Cliffhanger. Just as I thought we might finally be on the same page, the doorbell rang. I stood up, startled, and walked to the door. When I opened it, I wasn't prepared for what I saw. Standing there, looking as stunned as I felt, was the travel agent, holding a fresh batch of paperwork. "Sorry to bother you, Maya," she said, her voice uneasy. "There's been a mix-up with your cancellation request. I need you to sign a few more forms. It looks like we've made an error on our end." I stared at her, confused. "What error?" She hesitated, glancing behind me at my dad. "We accidentally processed the refund, but we didn't finalize the cancellation. We've just been notified that the tickets are still active." My heart dropped into my stomach. Still active? After all this, after everything, was it possible? Was the trip still on? The travel agent's next words sent a chill down my spine. "The tickets are still valid, and you have until tomorrow to confirm if you want to keep the booking. Otherwise, they'll be automatically reactivated." I turned slowly, looking at Dad, whose face had gone pale as he processed the news. Was this a second chance? Or was it just a cruel reminder of everything we'd almost lost? The room seemed to close in around me as I processed what the travel agent had just said. The tickets are still valid. The trip was still on. After everything, after all the pain, the cancelled flights, the uncertainty, it felt like a punch to the gut. I stood there, staring at the agent in disbelief, unable to find the words to respond. Dad was silent behind me, his face pale, his eyes wide with shock. I could tell he was just as stunned as I was. His hands were clenched tightly, his knuckles white with tension. He didn't say anything, but I could feel his uncertainty in the air, thick and suffocating. The travel agent continued, her voice quiet but professional. You have until tomorrow to confirm, Maya. You'll need to either cancel the tickets for good or decide if you want to allow the booking to proceed. I stood frozen at the door, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. This wasn't just about a trip anymore. It was about everything. About whether or not I was willing to let go of the past and give my dad the second chance he was asking for. The decision seemed impossible. I could see the hope in my dad's eyes, the raw vulnerability that had been missing for so long. But could I really trust him? Could I believe that this time, he would follow through? Or was I just setting myself up for more disappointment? I glanced over my shoulder at Dad. He wasn't speaking, but his eyes were pleading, desperate for a sign that maybe, just maybe, we could fix things between us. My heart ached as I watched him. It had been so long since I saw him like this, so raw, so willing to try, so ready to rebuild what had been broken. I don't know what to do, I whispered, more to myself than anyone else. Dad stepped forward slowly, his voice unsteady but determined. I don't want to lose you, Maya. I don't care about the trip anymore. I just want us to fix this. I want to prove to you that I can be the dad you need, the dad I've never been. You're what matters. Not the trip. Not the dream I had, but you. His words were simple, but they cut through the fog of confusion in my mind. For the first time in a long time, I could feel the sincerity in his voice. He wasn't just saying the right things. He was showing me that he meant them. And maybe that was enough. Maybe it was time to stop holding on to the anger, to stop using the past as an excuse to shut him out. The silence between us stretched on for what felt like an eternity. The travel agent stood quietly in the background, waiting for us to decide. But the decision didn't feel as impossible anymore. I wasn't just choosing whether to cancel a trip. I was choosing whether to let my dad back into my life. And for the first time, I felt like I could know, I wanted to give him that chance. I'll cancel it, I said, my voice steady. I'll cancel it all. Dad's face crumbled, and for a moment, I thought I might have made the wrong choice. But then, before I could second-guess myself, he stepped forward and wrapped his arms around me, pulling me into a tight hug. Thank you, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Thank you for giving me a chance to make it right. I closed my eyes, letting the warmth of his embrace settle over me. Maybe it was the right choice. Maybe this was the beginning of something new. I wasn't sure yet. But I knew one thing for sure. I was tired of holding on to the past. I was tired of being angry. And maybe, just maybe, this was the first step in healing the wounds we'd both carried for so long. As I pulled away from the hug, I looked him in the eyes and said, we'll take it one step at a time. But I'm willing to try. I'm willing to let you prove to me that we can be a family again. Dad nodded, his eyes shining with unshed tears. I'll prove it. I swear I will. And just like that, the decision was made. The tickets were cancelled. The trip was over. But in its place, there was something far more valuable, a second chance. A chance to rebuild, to heal, and to move forward together. It wasn't an easy road, and it wasn't perfect. There were still moments of tension, moments when old habits crept in and threatened to pull us back into our old patterns. But over time, we both worked at it. Slowly but surely, Dad showed me that he meant what he said. He was there for me in ways he had never been before. And I learned to trust him again, piece by piece. We never made it to Europe. The trip didn't matter anymore. What mattered was the time we spent rebuilding our relationship, one conversation at a time. And in the end, that was the real journey, the one that took us both places we never expected to go, but places we both desperately needed to be.